order the Clerk Tax Renewal Board with a roll call of members present. Do we have a roll call of members present? We can show all members present.
All members present.
All members present. How's that?
Thank you.
You got to make sure I don't forget somebody. Approval of minutes from September 4th and September 23rd.
And October 2nd.
And October.
James has copies.
Have a good day.
Did anyone get a chance to look over those minutes?
No, we need to make copies, I guess. James wanted them signed first and then copied and given.
Signed by her, but not,
Okay, so we just have to, you wanna have, the official minutes and then we can. So typically, I guess typically how I'm used to doing that is what we would do is we would approve them.
Yeah.
And then they would get signed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if there's changes, Colleen will need to sign
Right.
again, but
Okay.
yours signature's still blank, so.
Are we willing to approve those minutes now, or do you guys wanna wait another meeting so everyone can read them and then we can approve them?
We can make copies right now, can't we?
Do you wanna make some just quick copies? We'll just get them read and dispense with that business so that we don't have to worry about it in the future. You'd probably make like 3, we can pass them around.
No, we're getting pretty good at killing trees.
I know, yeah. Well, maybe while we're just waiting for him to do that, I know we're gonna talk first about the survey and questions for the survey and how we wanna get the survey out. Is there anything else that folks wanna see us chat about today or accomplish today?
I would like to discuss a little bit about having a central place for all the documents to go.
Yep.
And if we use Google Docs or we use HubSpot, whatever is easiest for people to learn and to use. I just think that would help a lot
I
to
agree.
scan all that
I agree.
information into one
Yeah.
space.
I must admit, I did not look at HubSpot. I'm
And that's
really
okay.
used to using Google Docs,
And we
so
can absolutely use Google Docs too instead.
is anybody opposed to using Google Docs? Okay, let's do that. We'll talk with James and we'll make Google Docs our official place for documents. The nice thing about Google Docs, you can actually make a folder public so that anybody can have view-only access to those documents.
And they'll be there for, 20 years from now, when they need to do hopefully the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that gets maybe, that's the.
I won't care, but-
It's supposed to be those ones on the 3.5-inch discs. The 5 1/4, where is that?
Tim, have you used Google Documents?
Very little,
But you have
but
an
I
account?
don't, yeah.
Oh, do you have an account?
If you have a Gmail account, you have an account, right?
I have an account with the city, yes, Google,
Yeah.
what do you call it? Email list.
Oh, yeah, that's
That's
different. So
different.
this would just be, this is a place, so you have to have a Gmail account to get into it, but you can get a free account. And,
I do
oh,
have a Gmail.
okay, yeah, so then we can just share it with you and you can have access to it. We can show you how to do it. It's
Okay.
real easy.
We can give everyone a refresher course on how to access it and how
Yeah,
to
it's pretty
attach documents
standard.
up in there and.
Does anybody have any?
Yeah, I mean, my Google Drive is saving all my stuff and all my docs and everything, and I just run it by Google.
Yeah.
Just do this Microsoft.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, like that Google Microsoft competition thing. Does anybody have any corrections for the October 2nd meetings? I'll entertain a motion to approve the October 2nd meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second?
Moved and seconded, all in favor of approving October 2nd meeting minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. September 23rd. September 4th. All right, we'll look at September 23rd next. Okay. Everybody. Questions or comments on September 23rd meeting minutes? I'll entertain a motion for September 23rd.
So moved.
Second. It's moved and seconded to approve September 23rd meeting. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, September 23rd, and now we just need September 4th.
Thank you.
The September 4th one was signed by me as acting secretary because nobody.
We hadn't elected anybody yet. I think because we met and talked about it, even though it wasn't necessarily an official meeting, I think we should still record the minutes. And it seems
Yeah,
an accurate representation of what we discussed, so,
and you have acting secretary.
yeah, so that, I think that works, yeah. So, any questions on September 4th? I'll take a motion to approve them.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
You can sign.
Yep.
And you'll notice the minutes got shorter between September 4th and September 23rd because our chairman advised that I don't need to put down quite such details, so.
Yes, you do not need, anything that you think's relevant can always be included in the menu, but the minimum that must be is any, motions that were made.
Right,
Any, the fact that they were moved and motion made and seconded and what that motion was.
yeah, well, I just wanted to explain, that's why the
Yeah.
difference in the length of the minutes.
Got bored already.
But anything else that you feel is important can be included in those minutes.
Yes,
Tom, while I'm thinking about it, did you look through the bylaws?
I did, and I brought them with me, and I think I'm prepared to sign them. I just was gonna take one more quick look at them before I finished, and then I'll sign them after this meeting.
We're gonna start getting all those things up on the website, the minutes, the bylaws.
That's great. Sounds perfect. We can put some stuff in. All right, so, we'll move right into, discussion of the survey. Tim?
And I sent out this morning,
And I have copies of that right here, which is sent out.
and it's just kind of based on questions that we've had and suggestions and listening to the people. Steve, I think one of the, probably one of the most important things is to find out kind of the level of what their knowledge of the resort tax is. Just on the way walking here, I told somebody else what I was doing, I told them, I said, nobody in town knows what is actually taxed. Yeah, that's,
That's not institution.
that's probably one of the biggest,
Yeah.
and I would say probably the majority. I think I could say that with pretty good confidence.
Don't know what's taxed.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, obviously you can't address that in detail on a survey, but you certainly need to ask that question.
Yeah, yeah.
Are you aware, and that's where, there's a lot of, the things I put on here, there's no structure to it. Other than, these are the types of things that we'd like to address. And then I thought that we as a group could start the process. I could go in, say this is a, do you approve, disapprove scale? This question is a ranking scale. Where do you rank these particular items in the group? Or there could be, say that this question is going to be one like, rate your priorities. What should we spend on? Pick some. Is it ratings? I mean, do you put them all up there and click the ones you like, or do you put a rating on each one? However we want to do that, then I can start building the survey and then send it around to everybody, and then we can fix it and then decide this is it. And that's something that can be done obviously between the meetings.
So, one of the questions I was contemplating this morning, and just quick for the group, is obviously the more comprehensive you make the survey, the less likely people are to fill it out.
Yes.
The quicker the survey, the more likely people are to fill it out.
Yes.
So how do folks feel that, should it be relatively quick so we get a lot of people? Should it be totally comprehensive so we answer all the questions, or should it be somewhere in the middle. Leaning one direction or the other?
Somewhere in the middle.
I would recommend that you break it up, into shorter surveys. We need this chunk of information now, and then a couple weeks down the road, we can do another one with more chunks of information. When we did the recycling survey in 2017, I think it was 6 questions, and the first day we had over 200 responses. By the end of it, we had 500 responses. And it was good information to get from people.
Yeah, okay.
But it was not
Overly complicated.
I do like the idea of phases, get a phase 1 survey out there, probably what do you know about that kind of information together.
Well, and that might help us prepare the next survey.
Exactly. Yeah,
It's like, here's where we are, so this is what we need to do.
Yeah.
One of the things they did a presentation at the high school about 2 weeks ago on vaping. And they used an app called Kahoot. And it was you can actually survey the people that are in the room, and then it comes up on the screen.
That's pretty fun, yeah.
It was really fun, and I thought that might be a good thing to do
Public meeting.
in a public meeting, and then we could ask things like, what do you think is taxed, and have various information, and then give them the correct information. But Kahoot, anybody can download it.
Would you record that in the minutes, just the idea that we might do, live surveys?
How do you spell?
Kahoot, Kahoot.
And there's a couple other companies that do those, but they're really, I've used those, sometimes it's just for fun. I've used them in a lot of presentations that I didn't participate in, I've never actually administered, but, and it populates all the answers right there as you're doing it, and so you can get a feel for how people think about things.
Right, and then it also tracks everybody's answers, so they get so many points if they answered quickly and they got it correct. I mean, at the end you can have,
Prizes
you
or something.
know the results.
I chatted with Tim just briefly about this, but I think this is something that we want to talk about too a little bit in terms of the survey. Is it an anonymous survey, or is it a not anonymous survey? We ask for name and address for folks, and I see personally two different some advantages and disadvantages. But one real advantage I see to asking folks for some information is it'll be honest and connected to folks that we know will want to do it, as opposed to something that it's someone could send it off to India to have 500 people take a survey and get the information back. And there are ways to limit that, you know, in terms of IP address filtering. And you can also have both options in a survey too. You could have a survey that is, and you can even have two different surveys, you know, one that is, you know, kind of a little bit more comprehensive, that's you know, where people put their name to it. And not so we can publish it, but more just so you can ensure that the information that you're getting is accurate. And then you can have an anonymous survey that, you know, obviously that people can fill out 75 times if they wanted to. So advantages and disadvantages there. I guess what are your thoughts on you know, kind of a name survey as opposed to an anonymous survey?
I like the idea of a name survey because it's more qualified information. You know, just my experience with dealing with them through the chamber is when it's anonymous, you get some pretty out there.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're not willing to put your name to it,
That's right up to your opinion.
yeah,
You know?
Exactly.
that's it. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
I'm willing to give a negative opinion to something and put my name on it, and positive as well. I mean, if I believe in it, I should be willing to put my name on it.
Yeah.
So I don't have a problem.
And I think, you know, we wouldn't have to publish, we would not, you know, we can let people know that their information will not be associated with their name. Like, we're not, it's not gonna be publicly put out there, but just that it's, and I think even in the survey, sometimes there's ways to separate that. So we don't even really necessarily know, but we know that it came from somebody who was qualified.
There is, I think
Yeah.
there is, you can, whether or not they're within the city limits of Red Lodge or the county, or, you know, who's taking, you're gonna wanna know who's taking it, because who's voting on it is.
Yeah, the big difference, yeah,
Yeah, if you live out in the county, you're probably more likely to vote against it.
maybe.
When you can potentially parse those answers too, to be like, is there a difference of opinion between
Yeah.
both? And it's-
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
actually did that with recycling survey,
Yeah.
so that we
Yeah.
could see who was using it inside the county and who was using it outside the
Yeah.
county.
Yeah.
We didn't take names, but we did ask for their email address so that we could start a email
Yeah,
newsletter. That never happened.
We should ask them if they're within the city limits.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, I
Yeah.
think we need to know where they
Yeah.
live, because they're the ones who are gonna vote on it.
yeah,
I will say that we need to be careful how we do this survey and names that are taken. Because the police survey was used in a lawsuit against my sister and I. That was supposed to be anonymous and not used, and it was, so that's on the city, and the city better make sure that it stays.
All we have to do is do it right.
yeah, just do it correctly, yep, yeah, I think that's, you know, that's an accurate thing, okay? So, let's try and go through and just talk about these questions a little bit. And maybe I'll just give everyone a second to read it, and then just talk a little bit about what kinds of questions in here do you like? What do you not like? And is there something in here you would like to see that you don't see? I was gonna wonder if we could make a couple, do you wanna just make another copy or two of that just for these guys so they know what we're talking about? Thank you.
One thing, if we bring in to the survey about the 1%, I think we're gonna have to explain what that is to people.
Yeah, I thought that too. That was my first thing.
Do you
Is
support the
1%?
1%?
Sure, what is 1%?
I know.
Yeah.
So just for you folks, so the resort tax, currently, in resort tax law, what we currently have is we assess a 3% resort tax on items that were approved. In this last legislative session, the legislature approved an additional 1% that cities can levy. And in doing that, passing that law, they did two things. One is they said that the 1% can be used for items that the city sells bonds for. So basically, tax bond issues. Okay, the city can pledge that 1% against the bonds. But it also said that you cannot use the 3% for tax bonded issues. So you can't pledge any money of the 3% against tax bonds. So what that means is that for something like a storm sewer project, where the city might want to levy bonds or sell bonds, you could use the 1%, but you can't use the 3%. Now, the city could still go out and borrow money and secure that money against either tax income, regular tax income, property taxes, or other forms of revenue the city has. And then they could use resort tax to pay down that debt. But it's just a slightly different process in terms of, with the 1%, the city can say, we reasonably anticipate levying, receiving $300,000 a year from this 1% over the next 20 years, and we will commit to paying $300,000 or the entire amount of the 1% really towards this bonded issue. And if it pays off early, it pays off early. Once it pays off early, that 1% goes away unless the city has passed another 1% levy. So it can only be for that one project.
Right, and I think that people need to have that information before they take the survey.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah,
So that they understand.
Well, and I think, in our idea of possibly splitting up surveys, we may want to do a survey first about the 3%, the current 3%, and then maybe it's a second survey that would say, explain a little bit of what it is. Would you support 1% for, and I think probably really we need to, because for me, am I going to support 1%, to build a monument to somebody on the, probably not, right? But would I
Some
support
people
what?
might.
Yeah, no, some people might. I'm just saying I would. So my questions the answers to my questions might be different based on what the project was. And so we might have to take some more work there.
Yeah.
There's plenty in the CIP.
The other part of that is our number one priority is that 3%.
Yes. But I personally, honestly, I thought the way West Yellowstone did it?
Yep.
Yeah, West Yellowstone did it, where they renewed their 3% and did the 1% all together with one ballot initiative really makes sense. And you could do them as separate items on a ballot, but you could do it with one program.
With enough education?
With enough education,
Yes.
because you never want it to be anybody to look at it as an either or.
Right.
Well,
Because
but-
that 1% is not much good without the 3%.
But you can, yes, that's true, but you can ask them as separate questions, I would say, on the same mail ballot. You can say, do you support the 3% resort tax, blah, blah, blah. Second question, do you support a 1% resort tax, additional 1% to support?
Additional.
Yes.
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 Yeah.
With a brief explanation maybe above the question or.
What you're allowed to do with ballot language is you have to be very careful. In ballot language, you can't advocate for something, you have to just provide the facts that are.
Right.
Yeah,
And that 1% has to be allocated to a specific project.
exactly, yeah.
So it's not,
A
They did
single
water
project.
down that bill so that
Yeah.
it's projects.
Yeah, the way.
It can be split.
but it
West
has to
Yellowstone
be
did not do
specific.
that project.
Correct.
Yeah, well,
We might do this, we might do this, we might do this.
one of the towns actually did that, where they gave like 3 different things that they were planning.
That they
using
may,
Which is probably a good idea.
and they may do one or they may do all.
Yeah.
That was the way I read it.
But it has to be too specific.
But they were 3 specific projects,
Yeah.
all on the same one.
Yeah.
And they may or may not do any or all of them.
We
Okay.
have to do some of them if it passes.
So let's bring ourselves back around and talk about just concepts, short and to the point, easy to answer, not anonymous, area residents, not restricted in city limits, but qualified, right?
Yeah,
So
I like that qualified.
are you do you live in the city of Red Lodge? Do you live outside? And potentially,
Are you registered to vote?
yeah, and I think we might want to be cautious about that question about whether they're registered to vote or not,
Here's your ballot. I mean, here's
Yeah,
your registration.
yeah,
Sign
yeah.
it.
Well, yeah,
Cool.
I think I don't know, just personally, I feel a little bit when you're asking their name and then you're asking if they're registered to vote, maybe that it's a
Yeah.
little bit personal if you ask
Except
if
it's
they.
all legal.
Yeah, and we
I
can
mean,
find
I mean,
out,
It's all out there.
it's all public information, we can actually
But I
literally go
understand what
get,
you're
yeah.
saying.
So maybe just asking if they live within the city limits, you know.
Do you feel that?
But, and then you may ask, do you live within the city limits, and then you could ask, do you own property within the city limits? Because like I don't live within the city limits, but I do own property within the city limits, so you might get a different, you know, that's helpful to know.
Do you think any of those qualifying answers would only be valid if indeed they're named? In other words, an anonymous survey, anybody can click any box.
That's correct, that's, yeah,
So it should be a named survey and then the qualifiers.
yeah. Yeah,
And usually those can be set up so you can't submit it.
Yeah, exactly. Put something in there, even if it's zero.
yeah. And I think it's just a little bit, just looking to make sure we get accurate information. I mean,
Yeah, I
that's the
think that's
only,
important.
and I think we, you know, probably wanna make a commitment is that we don't wanna, you know, connect people's answers with their name in the survey. We wanna separate that, but we just wanna validate the survey. And we'll look and see, maybe SurveyMonkey or whoever we use. Google surveys, I think, a little harder to do that with.
You can just delete the column once your survey's done.
Yeah,
You know, you don't need people's names, so you just delete that column.
Do you wanna ask if they're a business owner?
yeah, I think so.
They're not doing
Yeah,
business.
I think that's a good thing to. Are you right, Nancy?
So the questions we've agreed on then are the qualifying questions, I should say.
Yeah, and I think what we'll do is,
In or out of town?
yeah, and I think what we can do is allow Tim to put this together into the survey, and then what we'll use is that,
Okay.
Yeah,
that information to come back to us to,
yeah, the first draft will look a lot like this piece of paper. Do a.
I'm looking, I like the what are your thoughts?
I like the what are your
What
thoughts
are your
too.
thoughts?
Yeah, I read that this morning because it's like, water, what are your thoughts?
I thought it was just a sign.
Take your thoughts and water them down.
Yeah.
I'll send you the link to the recycling survey and the spreadsheet that we ended up at the end.
That's great.
You can see what I'm saying.
Yeah, working with a company that will help process the information is helpful. You know, where as opposed to just getting the number of answers, some of them will give you, 27% answered yes to this, and 20, you know.
The questions like, do you know what is taxed? Do you know how the money is spent? Do you feel the money is being spent properly? They might answer yes to those first two questions and really not know.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, how do you?
As we were talking, I kind of looked at that section as maybe that's one of the subsequent surveys. And just how likely are you to vote yes on renewing today?
I like that
And do
question.
you
Yeah.
believe the resort tax, well, yeah, because you wrote that. Do you believe the resort tax has had a positive impact on the community?
Yeah.
Because those are kind of a generality and
Right.
get us started without, and then you could go back and do one that was like the specifics of how the money is.
Yeah, so you might, you might just simply ask the question to say, do you think the list of items do you think the items that are taxed, is fair, or, I have to figure out the right wording there, but, just basically ask a qualifying question, and then that leads us to maybe there is a follow-up survey or there's
Oh, I
not.
see, yeah.
I mean, if
Or
everybody, if you get 83% say they feel like the appropriate, maybe say, do you feel like the appropriate items are taxed? There's not a lot of qualifying information there, but to get the qualifying information, you have to ask a lot more questions. So then you might just ask that question. And if you get, like I said, 89% say they think the appropriate items are taxed, then maybe we don't need a follow-up survey. If 12% say the appropriate items are taxed, probably need a follow-up survey.
And a lot of education.
Yes, yeah.
Would you include a list of the taxable items?
I don't think, I think one of the things we have to be cautious of is getting too far into that detail, because one of the things that we've said is that that's really not where we are.
Right.
We are not going to address the list of items taxed.
That's
It's
already
a separate
done.
committee, it's a separate process, but what we might do is, recommend, that gets looked at or something.
But if only 12% say if the appropriate items are taxed, then we need as a group to do some education on what's taxed, because they may be thinking that everything's taxed,
Yeah,
and it's not.
Would you do that rather than a yes or no, then?
a scale of 1 to 10.
Maybe more of a qualifier.
Yep, I think that's not a bad idea.
Can always put a comment box.
Yeah. Well, but I think, I think on a scale of 1 to 10, do you feel like the appropriate items are taxed? If you put an 8, it's a big difference between a 2.
Right.
But you might say no because of one thing, but you might still give it an 8. You know what I'm saying? So I think that gives you a more accurate for their
With a
feeling.
comment box, just like,
Yeah.
you know, don't, and tell us what's happening, what should be.
What do you think of the idea of deciding up front if we're gonna have more than one survey? And consider phase 1 survey as almost just gathering our starting point, our status of what everyone, what do you know? So these, do you know what is taxed, do you know how the money is spent? Those questions would all be phase 1. And then just see what people know about it, and then have a subsequent survey that delves more.
Things that
It actually-
keep us driving
And I guess what I was
Sure.
leading was saying is that the answers to this question might drive whether we need a follow-up survey. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally, and it would inform the creation of that survey, but I almost think it's a given. I don't know.
I think so, probably too. But this survey would help, but I think you're right. The questions we ask on this survey might help drive subsequent surveys, and we don't want to get into 40 surveys, it should be 2.
No, yeah. So just so I'm keeping up, do you live within city limits, do you own property, are you a business owner? How likely are you to vote yes? Do you believe the resort tax has a positive impact? Do you think the appropriate items are taxed?
Yep, you got
Those
it.
are good.
Yeah.
And not get into support 3%, 1% on
Right.
this survey.
No, yeah. So far anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and that kind of, that takes care of the, do you know what is taxed, do you think the appropriate items are taxed?
Yeah,
And then
yes.
the list of ranking, maybe just decide that out on the next one,
Yeah,
I would think.
yeah, no, I like where your thoughts, sure.
I might still, I think,
I mean, I don't know.
if that's all we are, or how many questions so far, 5, 6?
Well, other than the qualifiers,
Yeah.
there's 3.
Yeah, so I think I put this priorities in there, because that
Right.
could give us a lot of information, it's really within our
Yeah.
purview. And it
We
might,
might do it twice.
exactly, yeah, and it might give us some follow-up information too,
Because you can do it 2 different ways.
yeah.
The just pick, and then the scale.
Or even exactly the same, but post town halls and education. People are more informed, maybe their opinion will change.
Well, we may want to think about how
What do you think do you think the money is spent properly? I mean, is it worth kind of some sort of general question there to get a feeling?
how about, as opposed to you think the money, do you think the city of Red Lodge has benefited from the resort tax? On a scale of 1 to 10?
Yeah, because
Is
if
that
you say
where,
being
does that
spent
go to you
properly.
believe that has had a positive impact, so that you've already kind of taken care of that one?
Yeah, maybe that's enough, because, yeah, maybe just, do you believe it has had a positive impact?
Yeah, because if you say it's being spent properly, that's almost insinuating that it hasn't been.
Yes, yep, I agree with that.
And we
Yeah.
don't wanna get into that.
Right,
It's a little
yeah,
snarky.
yeah.
And if you thought, if you thought the money had been wasted, would you say
That's the
that
top of my head.
you thought it's had a positive impact on the community? Would you give it 10?
So that one might be a scale too.
Yeah, I'm wondering,
I think a scale.
I'm wondering if maybe, what was the question that I just said? Maybe it's worth it to ask that question twice. It would
Two
just,
different ways.
yeah, 2 different ways. Well, you might find you get different answers from folks.
Oh, yeah.
I like having a yes, no for at least one of them, if we do a scale, because otherwise we'll end up with a maybe no matter what. We'll be maybe mostly.
Yeah,
I feel like if we could say
Right.
40% of people don't like it.
As far as the questions, I guess one of the things I'd ask as in developing the question is, what will we do with the information? What purpose does the information, the yes, no, do you know it's taxed? Yes. but maybe they don't.
Yeah, that's why I
mean,
think
that's
that's,
kind of I think I know it's taxed, so
Yeah.
that's- but what
That's
purpose
why I
does it serve?
suggested
I mean,
we put a
what are
list.
you gonna do with the information once you receive it? Is it valuable information, or is it just, I guess that's the question.
Initially, when our decision was to have a survey now, before the public meeting, was to give us an idea what we should be talking at the public meeting about, kind of get an idea of what people know or don't know about it, so that we would know.
Like, I see some of the answers as being, relative and having
Maybe.
positive feedback that you're gathering information you can use.
Yeah.
So, was it properly spent, yes or no? That answer means you get some information you can use.
Yeah.
The public's general feeling is, yes, it was spent well, or no, it wasn't. Then you can address that in your public meeting. But do you know it was taxed?
Yeah, and that's what, I think we already said that we wouldn't, you asked the, do you know what's taxed? We said, do you think the appropriate items are taxed?
Right.
Yeah, just cause that gets to their feeling more than their specific asking knowledge. Heather?
There's a lot of questions in here that I don't think that people can answer because they don't have the knowledge. I mean, even myself, so do you know what's taxed? Not really, do I care? No.
Yeah.
But
That could be a question right there.
Well, yeah, but
So
if you
we're
just
gonna
have
cross
a
out the do you know what's taxed question right now.
No, that's not my point.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
No, that's not my point, because several of this relates kind of to my point, is that I think people would find it interesting what is really taxed. And so if, it doesn't have to be like on the survey, but if you just said, if you want the information, here's a link, so that they can link to it and see what's,
Good idea.
get the information.
You can do that. Yeah, we
This
can
is-
link to tax
I'll
items.
tell you, this morning before I typed it, this was, do they know what is taxed? Do they know? And that was, my intention was to ask, do we feel that's important? I mean, is that something that we need to find out? And how do we find out the answer to that? I mean, do the people know?
I've used a survey, tool that you can show the right answers. So like if you had a multiple choice, you listed all the things that are taxed and said, you could ask them which one of these are taxed. And then it'll show them right there, so you.
That could be a separate, that could be a test your knowledge, a test your resort tax, cause that actually, I really like that idea.
Education.
Because I liked your question, and you'll probably tell me I told you to ask this one again. I liked your question about, do you know how much do you know how much property tax the city collected last year? Do you know how much resort tax the city collected last year? So maybe in the multiple survey concept, there's a separate thing that's more of like an informational survey. Like, here's information about do you think this item is taxed? Do you think this item is taxed? And it tells them whether they got it, yes or no. How much money do you think is collected by resort tax? $12.83, $4.7 million. You could.
And tell them what the money has gone for. When you're
Yeah.
saying, has it made a positive impact, or do you feel it's spent properly? Again, if they can see, not on the survey, but again, a quick little link, so that
Yeah.
they can see where the money has gone, because people just don't know.
And I would.
Because they don't.
It's, yeah, if you're engaged with them, if you have an opportunity to educate them at the same time. And I would say instead of numbers, I would say like a percentage, like relative to the whole budget, because people don't know numbers.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you do this survey before you have a public meeting, then you say, well, we're going to have to spend a minimum of an hour explaining where the money's going, or, there's not a lot of connection there, so you really need to focus on this.
You could tie that into
The
your
purpose.
Kahoot.
Yeah, you could do that for the
All that-
Kahoot in a live public meeting, and you could literally ask people some of those questions and then have it pop up, and then you could have a conversation about it. That'd be actually kind of fun.
Okay, so we haven't made it past, do you think the appropriate items are taxed? That was the last one.
And maybe we don't have to ask that kind of stuff,
I
Well,
would
you
rather
except
get,
at the
could
public
ask it.
meeting, and then,
That
Give
would be
them
valuable feedback if the majority of the people said yes, That's valuable feedback. Yeah, if they say no, allow for a comment box if they want
Yeah.
to say why.
I like the do you think appropriate items are taxed in the beginning, because I think that, like you said, that gives us yeah, man, again, 90% think they are, okay, great, we're headed down
We've
one
already
road.
spent 20 years sorting that out.
Yeah, and I would be shocked if, 2%, said, only 2% said that they thought the appropriate items were taxed, like, that would really help us get there, I think.
Those of us that are in business know what's taxed.
Not necessarily.
Well,
I
for the
I
most,
charged tax on candy for 2 years before I found out that it had been removed. Actually, longer than that, for 4 years.
is it not taxable?
It wasn't, and
Oh,
then they
it's
put it
not.
back
I was
on.
gonna say, because we're paying tax on it.
Somebody threatened me because I was collecting tax on an inappropriate item, a non-taxed item, and I was like, candy's been taxed from the beginning. I went, no, it's not. So I come to the city hall, they went, no, it isn't. I went, oh, okay.
But it is now.
4 years we taxed it, because it was in the beginning. Then in one of the reviews, it was removed.
See, and that's
And then
the
the
part
next
that's
committee,
hard for
It
business
was
But it
owners.
added.
But like
No,
Frank
it's
said
not
the other,
the one.
last week, Frank at True Value said, I run into people that think a snow blower is taxed. And he's like, how do we get that information out to people, that no, snow blower is not a luxury item, it's not taxed, but
Not about that, anyway.
that's just, but
Yeah.
that's some of the misinformation that people have out there.
I also, and I think some of that is trying to figure out whether that, sometimes those stories are, is thinking that's tax pervasive or not? Like, do most people think that a snowblower's tax, or was it one person who thought a snowblower was taxed? And trying to figure that out really is helpful. I thought candy was taxed, and I never knew that it went out of being taxed and came back into
No.
being taxed, and it's back, and I think it should be taxed, right?
Well, in New Jersey, if the candy. has
How much
been
flour?
refrigerated, it isn't taxed.
Doesn't have a nut
So, to stay on the survey, then, do you think the appropriate items are taxed? Did we kind of say that one would have a memo field? So they could qualify their answer, and then did that?
I think I think that would be a range field, like,
A range field?
yes. And then you can, I think we'll allow people to make comments,
At the end of
And then-
it, just
and
say,
then put
do you
a
have
memo
any?
box on it.
yeah.
Okay, so that's range.
Well, I do like the idea of having just like a little hyperlink under the question.
So they
Go
can
to
and
the
see.
list.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, here's the list of things that are taxed,
Yeah, that's,
you approve.
Yeah, because in order to give valid answers, you have to be sure they know what they're answering.
Because then we do achieve some education at the
Sure.
same time.
I do think we should try and not focus too much on the taxable items, just because there'll be a whole different.
Yeah, there's a whole different
Yeah.
committee, that gets to be
Bog us
decided
down.
by another group,
And it
yes.
could, if we ask too many questions, we don't want the conversation to get dominated on that.
It is now.
And I think,
That's what kind of word we did.
but I think one of the things, if the conversation if that is the conversation that's dominated, one of the things that we need to continue to educate people on and say, okay, let's assume that this process can get solved by a resort tax review committee. Can you support the resort tax? I think that's, is your concerns about the tax item, is that a deal breaker for the tax or not? And I think that's some of what the question we need to find out is.
That's a relevant question.
Yeah.
obviously.
And I really think we need to ask about the priorities in the first survey.
I do too.
Because I think we should ask that every single time we give a survey.
well,
It should
and
be asked more.
their priorities could change as the education
Yeah.
gets out there.
Your biggest issue in getting it passed again is not what's taxed, but how it was spent. That's gonna be your biggest hot point for passing the.
And I think education on that too is, so let's look at this list, because I think, and actually, one of the things here, when we talk about this priority list, it also has to do with how we word things, right? Because to me, infrastructure, what does that mean, right? What does capital improvements
What's the
mean?
difference?
And how would you rate capital improvements versus water and sewer? Because is it water and sewer rates, or is it, so let's kind of narrow that down, and maybe we can go to our list of things that it's been spent on already a little bit and see if there's some, you
It's
know,
not water and sewer.
Before I
but it's- yeah.
forget, then, you know, when we do that, should we do the same thing Jeremy's talking about and put up that sheet that we did with just the simple percentages over the life of it, so we can see right there
Like what it currently is.
yeah.
what it currently was, you know, and that. I mean,
Here's what the
obviously
resort
that-
tax has
that's
been spent
changed.
on.
Yeah,
How would you rate priorities in the future? Maybe that's
That's
a,
a good way to do it, probably.
Yeah, but I just
Yeah, that's good.
what we spend.
and then do you think that one that I put together with the final percentages, I mean, it obviously, the yearly one would be big. The total one gives a picture of it, but it has years when there were things in there that
Right, it's not like
people would say that shouldn't have been. So
well, and also, I
don't
mean,
know
I
if it's
think,
a quality-
you know,
it's a quality
like
document.
for me, I think when we needed to bring new water lines into town, I think spending resort tax money on, you know, water and sewer lines made a lot of sense. And, you know, we already committed to paying that off essentially, right? But, you know, some of the question becomes, is that the appropriate in the future, you know? And so there's some difference. Sometimes you've spent a bunch of money to do something, so you don't think you should do it in the future, you know? And other times you want to continue that expenditure. So that's
Yeah, I agree, because if we've spent, you know, the majority of the resort tax on, improving our infrastructure of water and sewer lines, you know, is that where we wanna spend it in the future? Or if that's what people feel, you know, if you have those percentages out there, well, we've already, you know, helped them out, let's help you, you know. People could have those opinions, we don't know.
Hey.
They may have, you know, other priorities.
What-
that they want to spend on.
What do you guys feel about on the first survey, asking what people's priorities are? Kind of not doing the education first, because some of this helps us to understand what we need to educate people on a little bit. And just finding out what their priorities are independent of knowing where the money's gone might be helpful. Then that might drive us to another survey. And, you know, and a lot of what we said this survey was for too, and we have to remember this about our, you know, potential for second surveys, was really to drive discussion at the public meeting. You know, and so, you know, maybe it's the survey, then a public meeting, and then an evaluation of whether we need follow-up surveys. Does that make sense?
It does.
As a, you know, so we go through that process. We do the survey, we hold a public meeting, and then after the public meeting, we figure out how we need to move forward.
Do we wanna frame the priorities question as spending in general and not link it to the resort tax at all? Cause I'm kinda looking at this other question, how much property tax did the city collect last year? We could rephrase that one to be what portion of the city budget is paid for through the resort tax. And then, you know, then you could just rank essentially just spending priorities, cause, you know,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just a question. Like, should we have the priorities independent of? You know, so
Good
there's-
question. Very good
I
question.
don't know.
Would you answer that question differently if you thought it was non-resort tax money versus resort tax money?
I might, I don't know, that's why I was.
But then you'd have, if we did that, then you'd have to include other city budget items too, you know what I mean? Like,
Right,
then that becomes a little more complicated.
right.
Why,
Yeah,
why are you asking the question, how much property tax did the city collect?
We were, the goal, and I don't think we're gonna ask that here, I think we maybe already decided we wouldn't ask that question. But the goal was, do people understand the scope of the resort tax? You know, the real answer is, do most people know that we collect more in resort tax than we do in property tax?
They
I
don't,
think you-
but I
You need
don't,
to simplify the question to, 90% of the people would look at that question and go, no, what?
Yeah,
Okay, so what you just said might make more sense, is what
That-
percentage of
Yeah.
the budget do you think that the resort tax contributes?
yeah.
Again,
Or how does the
Yes.
resort tax compare to property tax revenues or
but
something
I don't
like
know that you wanna.
Nobody's gonna know that answer.
Yeah.
But, and the other is that you're putting in their face resort tax, property tax, 1%, why even bring up the property tax?
I think you're right. No, I think we should not ask that question in this survey.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
At a
that,
public meeting, it's
that might be a
great
public meeting
information.
question,
Yeah.
yeah, where
This
you
is just like
educate
tax
people
after
and then
tax
you can
after
have,
tax.
you could say, you could ask that question in a public meeting with that Kahoot survey, and it brings up their answers on the screen, and then you can explain to them how it works and what it does, and you can answer questions and do that in person, I think.
Yeah.
Then, did we decide on the rate your priorities, what the items would be?
So I think we need to do that right now. I would like to see us,
And I don't think I would put infrastructure or capital improvements, I would be specific
I think,
on those, like
Yeah.
you said, because I wouldn't know
I think you would
the
put it
difference,
to each
really.
department
yeah,
of the.
capital improvements,
Such as,
well, or capital improvements to water and sewer, capital improvements for emergency services, capital improvements for
Almost need to provide a definition, the city's definition of,
a capital improvement, yes.
State definition.
or the state definition.
Yeah, capital improvements are this,
Right.
right? And operating
Then you can ask
expenses
a
are this,
Well,
and then,
question
and I
after
think
to
that-
explain what they are.
Yeah, and I think we need to explain that, but, you know, cause it could go to operational expenses, if that's what the ordinance says.
yeah, I think we
when
need to ask
pass
if
it.
people,
So
yeah.
you need to say, you know, do you want it to go to capital improvements, or do you
Yeah.
want it to go to operational expenses, and this is the definition of both of those things.
And you need to
Or a
understand,
little
they need
both.
to understand that operating expenses is not just necessarily a bunch of money, you know, put into the general fund. It would be, okay, we created all these parks and now we can't maintain them. Do you want your resort tax to also go to?
Yeah, so you
maintenance?
could
We
say
bought a
maintenance,
snowplow,
maintenance to
can't pay
parks.
somebody to-
Yeah,
Yeah,
right,
parks
we
and
bought a brand new,
facilities.
yeah, plow truck to keep your streets
Yeah.
clean, but we can't afford to pay someone to drive it.
And I think we can have things that are, let's say, non-congruent, like you could ask, you know, snowplow, you know, or, you know, snow plowing. Like, I wouldn't think of a snowplow as a capital improvement to streets.
Right.
But if you told, you know, if you say capital improvements to streets, I think you're paving, right? So maybe we want to not be specific, but be, you know, not be so general. Maybe we want to ask things like paving and road maintenance. To me, sounds much different than capital improvements to street.
Yeah.
Snow plows,
Mhm.
as opposed, you know, purchasing new snow plows as opposed to funds for plowing roads, right? Like, that's the operational expense. So maybe we want to bring it down a level to what people might, and we won't cover everything, you know, water and sewer lines, you know, underground water and sewer
But then
lines.
you get
But if you
middle
say-
box, other things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you say funds for plowing streets.
Yeah,
That can include the plow and the person to plow
it can, yes, yep.
You know?
Yeah, and then,
It's simple,
and
too.
just don't say capital improvements or operating expenses, say park operations, emergency services.
Yeah,
Park. Yeah.
And then it'll give the idea of whether they want it to be only capital improvements or operation as well.
whatever the final list is
But and maybe,
decided.
and maybe we should just, maybe we should build this list, okay? And we can, maybe we'll do that kind of via email, like try and build the list up so you can, you know, you can send us out a draft and then we can make some comments. And maybe we should ask another question is, do you feel that the resort tax should be limited to only capital improvements, which are, you know, large items, and, you know, then we can use that and just do a yes or no question there.
That'd be worth it.
And then maybe you ask, you know, again, sometimes you can ask redundant questions. You know, do you think resort tax should be able to be spent on operational expenses as opposed, such as, you know, wages for snowplow operators, maintenance of parks, you know, and then just a yes or no question,
Like
and
there's a
see,
swimming pool.
yeah,
Yeah, that's, I mean, anybody's ever taken like a psychographic test, you answer this way, then they ask you 3 other questions and you answer completely different because
they change the wording slightly.
They change how you.
So I think we should ask, because that really is a huge question that we want to answer right now is, do people feel like the resort tax should only go to capital improvements, or should there be some component that can be spent on operational expenses
And
such
you,
as?
and you guys would have to, you won't like my first, because I would write that one as the leading as possible.
Yeah. Okay, well, write it leading and we'll fix it for you, or,
Fix it. Just know that going in.
Those
that-
questions are
that's what I'm
important,
gonna
what
do.
you're saying, because that guides you
yep.
to the future
Well-
versus what's happened in the past serves no purpose.
Well, yeah, how about, here's another way to do this. What if you said, do you think resort taxes should be spent on the following? And it's, each one is yes or no. And it says, to construct a swimming pool, lifeguards for a swimming pool, police officers' wages, police cars, snow plows,
Yeah.
new playgrounds, new park facilities, maintenance of park facilities. So you give them kind of this long list, and then from that list, you can kind of be like, hey, look, everybody said no to anything that was an operational expense, or it's all over the board. People clearly, it's not about whether it's capital or operational, it's about what they believe in. So you might find that nobody wants to spend any money on fire and EMS, but they want to spend all kinds of money on a swimming pool. You might find the opposite. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying?
Right,
Is that
yeah.
you kind of get this narrowed thing that you could, and they can say yes to everything or no to everything. That's one way to do it. The other is the priority list, right? And you could ask, but maybe in the beginning we just want to do the no, yes, no question.
That's what I'm thinking, and then from that, then you go back and narrow it into, these are the ones that are the most important. Now let's figure out which of these is the priority,
Yes, you got it.
and then.
That's what's gonna allow you to draft legislation that's gonna get
Right.
passed.
You got it. Yep.
You
Based on what
concentrate-
people said yes
Regardless
to.
of what the
Yep.
city feels is important, is what the taxpayers feel
The
is
voters,
important.
yeah.
That's gonna
Right.
get passed.
The city residents.
Yeah, it's what the
I mean,
voters-
really, they're the ones that are
it's the
voting.
people who
And
vote.
if we
Yep.
want it passed, we need to have their input and draft the legislation so that they wanna vote for it.
So is it-
And which is our, what we're tasked with, come up with something that people want.
So is everybody in agreement that we'll kind of do a list? And what I'd like to do is start out with the longest list possible
Right.
of yes, no things, and then narrow it down to something that we feel we can reasonably have in the survey. Does that make sense? So kind of, we can throw everything that sticks to the wall, and then we'll be like, okay, wait, this is, we have 7 questions that ask about water and sewer, we only need 1,
So do we want to start that process now, or do we want me to
Let's-
just take some of these off of here?
I would like to start, do we have our, do you mind doing some?
No, I
Let's just do it now and get it, and you guys can participate and put things up here.
James, I might have one we can use.
Well, and if everyone comes up with one thing that they absolutely say yes for a capital improvement that they want, one of these projects, maybe that's what we put as the one.
Yeah.
Or if there's a couple of them that everyone absolutely wants, then, those are the ideas.
I guarantee you, without education, there isn't anybody who's gonna say we should spend money on stormwater rehab.
I know, that's what it comes
There isn't a person in the world that wants to put money into stormwater rehab.
Flash.
However,
Except if they were
However.
educated.
as I said, without education.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep, I said
If their
without-
houses are
That's where I
flooding
live.
and the corners are horrible.
But that would be, it is a good, so there you get to start with
We could say
stormwater,
improve stormwater.
improve stormwater, how would you say it? Improve stormwater,
Management.
infrastructure. Yeah, stormwater management.
So it's just right there.
Yeah,
Okay.
let's put that
Well,
open.
you
Doesn't have to be the first question, but
absolutely.
you might wanna
at
write
our-
small.
At our meeting, I would be happy to stand up there and talk about how in 2011, when we had our hailstorm, there was hail coming up through people's toilets. Because of.
Don't have to tell me about that. I witnessed it. That happened at the restaurant.
I was
mean,
happy at a family reunion. We all had buckets hauling them out of my house.
Yeah, I mean,
The thing about
yeah.
the stormwater is it's so complicated, and if people really understood the cost that is involved of that water going into the system, through the system, it would be kind of a no-brainer. It's just that it's so complicated, it's trying to explain it to people, the actual cost.
I think, and I think even with our limited education, I think we really have come to believe that is, I think the city council the public works has said, hey, this is, we need to do the 1% on this, and then even with our liberal, the only other thing that has come up on our list for that 1% is the pool. And so we were looking to try to find other ways to do the pool, so that 1% can just go to stormwater.
Yeah, that's,
That's just super important.
with me, it's really simple. I want streets and sidewalks and boulevards.
Before you can do that.
Before you can do that,
Yep,
you have to
do
have-
stormwater,
you have
yep.
to do stormwater.
So I
that
think,
makes it real simple, stormwater.
improvements, paving of street paving, I think should be there, building sidewalks.
Yes.
Park maintenance.
Right. I don't know that people feel that we necessarily need more parks unless it's a soccer field. But.
Yeah.
But to be able to maintain what we've already created.
No, and that's another thing is people don't even realize how many parks we actually have
Yeah.
Right.
already.
And the trail system.
Yeah,
You know,
Trails,
have
I'll
we
put that on
completed the trail system yet,
Yeah.
and it's expensive to maintain all those. And we
Um,
have some that aren't maintained.
Exactly. Your
snowplows, since we had that consent.
I know this is probably just a minor issue, but once that list is finalized for the survey, it should be in alphabetical order so that we're not
We're not-
suggesting
yeah,
that something
sure.
is more important than anyone else,
Yeah.
anything else.
And we should have at least one item that begins with a Z.
Don't say that anymore.
How about, and again, I think just shout out anything you think, just get it up, don't try to analyze it, we'll just get the list and then we can, how about city buildings?
I mean, it's pool up there.
Yeah, pool.
Okay.
Yeah,
I don't know if it is.
And I think you should put workforce housing on there as well. I wouldn't put affordable housing, but workforce housing.
That's great, yeah, that was, I don't know where
Resort tax enforcement potentially.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely,
Oh, that's a
to
good
pay
one,
for the
yeah.
audits
Yeah.
that need to happen.
general fund.
Enhancement?
yeah, property tax reduction. How about if we just said general city operating expenses?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
better.
That's better than general fund.
And I think ultimately we probably need to cap that at a certain percentage.
Yes, absolutely.
Although some towns don't,
Right?
they just put it in a big pool and they spend it
And this
however they
one
want.
between,
West Hill sounds lucky.
City
Tim, what else
operations.
did you say with the, before the tax, the general city operating
City operations.
expenses?
City
City
operations.
operations, there was another one in there, I missed.
Did you get workforce housing?
I think I heard you got property tax relief,
Oh, that was it?
and we have emergency services up there, I'm sorry. I'm not
Well, and I
just
think,
articulating stuff out.
I think that we should try to
Break
break
that
that down,
down,
yeah, I mean,
police,
it's police. And I don't know how,
Yeah, cause I don't know if we could pay, if we have emergency services in there, we could probably pay a fee for the fire department. If we do it right, not a resort tax.
you could, or,
That would help the general fund.
Yeah.
So,
So who, do we help pay them for the EMT?
no, the
No.
fire department.
no, there's property tax money that goes for fire department. Yep.
And EMS.
And ultimately, yeah,
But the city just does
the amount that comes out of the general fund that goes to is just for fire protection, although it goes to one organization. Everybody also pays an assessment for EMS, and everybody, whether it's city or rural,
Right.
within the ambulance district pays an
And
assessment
that
fee.
pays for the first responder.
That it all goes into one budget, so we have multiple sources of income, but it all goes into one big pot and then gets spent out, divided on priorities again, so. I don't wanna parse it out because, our EMS folks do fire, our fire folks do EMS, and we use the same vehicle to do multiple things, and we all share the same toilet paper, kind of thing. We don't decide on whose toilet paper it is or anything like that.
This probably comes under the, workforce housing, but when I was thinking about workforce housing, my brain went to water sewer impact fees. So that it was easier for a developer to create and develop.
So you'd use like resort tax, if it was going to be used for
Yeah,
workforce
I don't
housing,
know if that, I think
you'd
the city
use the
should
resort
just,
tax to pay for
I
those?
think the city should just
That's a
not
compliment.
charge it,
It'd
but,
be a lot easier if the city could,
yeah.
but
Could you call it like
Thanks a lot.
development or something like that?
Well, the city can
Yeah.
use general fund money to pay impact fees. What the city can't do is waive impact fees.
Okay,
So you can take tax money and use it to pay an impact fee, but you cannot choose to waive the impact fee.
I see.
That's general impact.
A couple communities are waiving now,
It's-
and
but it
it's
is-
questionable.
It is, spent a lot of time doing impact research, and I will tell you that, believe it or not, it violates the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution to do that.
And I think-
It's that high of a level when you do an impact fee, because it has to do with how you take property, and it becomes a property taking issue when you do that.
Maybe we leave that one off.
Yeah.
Just leave it as a short, because,
I did a whole research, I did a whole research, I did a whole research thing on impact fees and constitutionality of impact fees, so.
just know that the city does have some grant money for down payments on low-income housing that we need to spend, so we can apply for another grant. But that's gotta get spent first, so.
What about marketing?
Yeah,
Oh,
marketing,
marketing?
yes.
Yeah, can't believe
I,
I forgot that.
I,
No, I
No.
just, I still,
Are you
it's just not high on my priority
It
list.
should
I mean,
be.
I look at tourism infrastructure, if that's what you consider marketing, is tourism.
so I think, how do we say tourism infrastructure?
marketing.
But what is tourism infrastructure?
Okay, tourism infrastructure to me is taking care of your parks.
Yeah,
It's beautifying downtown, it's being able to take money out of the fund and pay for fireworks, to pay for the flowers.
so
on
how
the
would we
street.
say that in
White
this, cause I
banners.
think if you said tourism infrastructure, I wouldn't know what you meant, and
Yeah.
I listen to it all the time.
Yeah.
So,
Beautification.
I would say downtown beautification such as flowers. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, that's what I would,
Cause and just to be clear, because one of the things that stopped the resort tax from being passed the first time, I mean, way prior to this happening, and then we tried to get marketing funds put in it after, and it got voted down. And you have, right now, in those days, we did not have a CDB and a TBIP.
yeah.
And, you know, and when you say marketing, most people are gonna think magazine or newspaper or radio advertising. And to me, it's way more than that. It's like, build a good product.
And then,
And people will come.
how about,
Wayfinding is an
business
example of
development.
tourism infrastructure. So that's what I, yes, things that make the town a better
Nice
place to
parks.
live and visit.
so put
The dog
economic,
park.
put economic
People
development
love
on
the
there
dog
too, and
park.
we may eliminate some of these, but.
Gets a lot of use.
So that's why I don't see marketing. And the last time, I literally had people saying that, well, you're setting this up to be able to take that money. No, I'm not.
All right, what else? I want to get us, we're gonna end here soon, so I want to make sure, and we can add things after this. Do you guys see anything else you'd like to see? The list actually is not as big as I thought it would be.
How about anybody?
Did you think about going through the city budget and having a representation for each kind of section of the budget? Whether it's like human resources and then like tangible things that you would spend money on.
For operational expenses.
Is there gonna be like pick your priorities, like instead of like some.
Well, we might later. What we were talking about doing is this would just be yes, no, and then based on what we got then we would then prioritize.
I'll add that to it. When I go through the budget, I'll just run through the budget and write it down.
Yeah.
Just a way to make sure you got everything covered.
Yeah.
And then, the other, going off of what she said, look at what we have, West Yellowstone and Big Sky. And Big Skies is really predominantly.
Arts and marketing and arts and humanities. I mean, they put a ton of money towards bringing in concerts and plays and supporting the arts center and.
Planning is a big thing. What Big Sky does not do is they do zero planning. They support organizations to plan, but they don't plan for the community itself.
Yeah, okay.
They don't do any centralized planning. They rely on each individual organization. So what happens then is they're very scattered and they don't have a cohesive vision for where the community's going.
Yeah.
I feel like you can feel that when you drive through.
And it shows.
It's like 4 or 5 towns,
And they're struggling right now
all
because of it.
in one. Yeah.
I mean, and would it be a priority to help, support nonprofits in town? You know, to use the resort tax to help support nonprofits, or, you know, like through the community foundation,
Put
or,
it up there and we can,
I mean, just to see what the answer is? It's not anything we've ever done before, but.
so maybe grants to nonprofits or something. would
Right,
be
where
the-
you create a fund that people can apply for a grant for different projects, because one of the towns did that.
Yes,
You
they
can
actually have
actually,
a board that.
How
Yeah.
about, I'm just looking across the street, food bank.
yeah,
I mean, you know, that, yours is way more general, but maybe
Right.
there's some specifics in there that,
but
You know,
if they
there's a
apply
big-
for a grant every year
Yeah.
to.
yeah. But there, some people might have, you know, yeah, the general concept of nonprofits might not be appealing to them, but something like the food bank might be, you know, so you
Right.
just maybe try to nab some of it. And we could keep this or leave it.
Yeah,
Like
and
say
it,
that
you know, and Mike, that just, it doesn't mean that I think it has to go this way, but my inclination is to keep things that are either impacted by our tourism
Yeah,
or would enhance our tourism,
yeah.
because that's what, I mean, that is.
So give some more examples of that, because I'm not sure that I don't see that picture up there. So what are some things that are impacted, like public facilities such as restrooms and,
Right.
Our parks, restrooms, I mean, and emergency services.
Yeah.
I mean, is the broad stroke,
Yeah.
but I mean, you need, I mean, our policing is important, and you know, I mean, the reason we have the type of hospital that we have here initially is because we have ski mountain,
yes,
and they stay busy.
Right,
So, I mean, those are the type of things that are impacted by tourism.
right.
And, I mean,
So those
and
emergency
of course, our
services
street.
with
Yeah.
3 ambulance calls a day.
Yeah.
Up to the Red Rock Mountain.
although, you know, surprisingly,
Wait,
believe it or
I
not,
didn't put that on there.
when I first started, we were doing 120 ambulance calls. I
Just
think
as
last year we did
tourism
30.
infrastructure, but maybe wayfinding is a separate line item.
Yeah.
I think it's new
I have
skis.
it here.
Technology of
I'll
new
put it
skis.
up here.
People have better control and get injured less.
Wearing helmets.
Snowboarders still
Yeah.
bang their heads in the train park, that you can't help, but I think the new skis have
And it
significantly
is
reduced.
helmets.
and
People
it's helmets and new ski
absolutely wear
technology,
helmets
yep.
now.
But it's a quarter of what it was when I first started here 25 years ago.
But that's, you know, that is, those are the things that, you know, obviously streets,
Yep.
parks.
Sidewalks.
Maybe garbage.
Lighting.
I think
Oh, that's a good one.
those two questions narrow the list quickly,
Yeah,
because you could throw everything out there,
yeah.
and people are just gonna go, I don't think so.
Yeah.
But
And
if you bring it back within the resort tax and focus it on impact and
Yeah, impact from tourism.
Do we start a public dumpster area for people so they quit stealing other people's, you know, effective services and dumping in Circle 17 or wherever?
My garbage rates at the
It's
restaurant
everywhere.
and pizza company went from $200 a month to $800 a month.
minus 1,200.
Yeah.
For one of the places.
Yep.
So for the grocery store,
Yeah.
went from, we were paying 400 and we called up and asked a question and went, oh, let's look at it.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened here. I almost had to fire someone for calling up and asking a question about our garbage rates. Oh, yeah, that's exactly what happened. They called up to see if we could reduce the number of garbage pickups, and they're like, oh, wait a second, you're only paying $275 a month, you should be paying $800. Like.
You were only paying $275.
I think-
Napa was paying more.
I think when they got rid of recycling, they expected everybody to up the amount of, I think there was a whole calculation that they did. When they got rid of recycling, they expected people who were doing recycling to up the amount of garbage that they were taking, and that didn't happen, and we pay literally like 5 times what someone in the village pays for garbage.
So
That's
do
when
we
the city
want to
goes
use
to
the,
renegotiate the garbage contract, hang on. It's
Or
not
do
gonna
we-
be
I mean,
cheaper.
do we want to use, I mean, for garbage, the cost at the cost of, for the recycling center and garbage?
Actually, recycling center, but that should be,
Does tourism impact the amount of garbage and recycling that
yeah,
we have?
Yes,
it does.
yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. they call that a transfer station usually, when we used to have one, it was up on Ron Wolf's land.
Right.
And I don't know how it was funded or what the deal was with it. It was actually, I think, part of the city's contract when it was BFI, that they had to have a transfer station for rural folks so that they could dump garbage and.
You see, the city can't have that contract because it's rural folks that need that contract. The
Yeah.
city residents each pay $300 a year for their garbage pickup. Businesses pay separate. So, that's why a transfer station, I mean, then you're looking at, are we providing that service for the county people?
Yeah.
So then we told people to go on up and talk to your commissioner, get a transfer station.
Right, the cost was extremely high to do a new transfer
Yeah.
station, and then we have the twice a year, the large, collection day where you can go take your couch,
Yeah.
couch down, or old bed down,
And the electronics,
which is kind of the alternative to a transfer station.
Yeah.
so.
Well, it cleans up things that end up in the backyards and in the alleys
Yeah.
because they don't take it.
Yeah.
Except for it's always snowing.
It seems to be.
Right?
I know, people don't know as much as they would if it was nicer
It used
out.
to be different weekends.
All right, anything else that folks want to put on the list? We will capture that list.
Yep.
Tim will put that into his stuff, and then we will email that out in a draft. Well, that's too many items, so we'll have to eliminate some, clearly, but we'll try to get the essence of it and the essence of just the feeling of what people think is appropriate and inappropriate, and then we can work on priorities as the next thing, maybe even after the public meeting.
So the stuff that I sent out to you guys after the last meeting was just the notes from all these sheets of paper
Yeah.
that we had answered, and then the top there was like, I don't know, 7 questions that are still kind of floating out there. And then I just did a list so I bundled things together for what was been spent, and just a list of positives of all the resort tax, and that's in your sheets. And I just kind of made the list, and then I put it like what we spent the most on down to what we spent the least on. Now James has just pointed out a few things, but that was just so that we would have an idea of where the money's gone.
Yeah.
And it is a great list, and it is a very positive list, and that will be good for our presentation at public hearings. So.
Yeah, and some of the questions on this sheet came off of.
Yeah, I just gathered up what was all on those sheets and put it kind of into some form that wasn't my writing.
That was, yeah,
Okay,
I did study.
Couple of,
skimmed it, it's good,
Yeah.
good stuff.
we talked about using Google Drive as our shared folder.
Uh-huh.
Can you create a Google Drive and share it with us?
Okay.
So we can add like all of the different
I'll send this to
other
you.
resort tax.
Yeah.
I'll type it.
Does anybody in the audience have anything they
I
want
can read
to?
my writings.
Does anybody in the audience have anything they want to share or add that we have not discussed?
I remember when this first passed, and I actually remember going into the grocery store and a few times, and the checkout person would say, oh, it wouldn't be so much if it wasn't for the same resort tax, and I finally said, if you quit talking about it, nobody'd even notice it.
The positive PR is definitely a big part of what we're doing, and I kind of tested one of our messages on the Yellowstone country when I was there, and we were talking about resort tax and TV tax and all these other taxes, and I said, can you imagine any other tax in the world you can increase without hurting by helping the community instead of draining out of the community? And the resort tax is the only one.
Right.
To raise your resort tax, all you have to do is bring in more people, and that helps the merchants. It creates jobs. Everything about it is a positive.
So the only people
And then
now that
having that
complain
PR.
in my new, not my new line of work, cause all I do is write the checks, but down at Bone Daddy's during rally, I've had a couple people say that it's illegal, that like we're stealing, like they literally think that we're stealing because they live in the state of Montana and there is no tax.
But they're visiting Red Lodge.
But they're, right, and so you spend 10 minutes trying to, and I've had people literally like, you are stealing and we know you're stealing. So that's been the only complaint I've ever had. And then people, sometimes they'll just ask the question in general, what's the tax for? And they're totally, I just say, it's infrastructure, we're a resort recreational community, And in order for you to come here and drive on our streets and use our restrooms and walk on our sidewalks, this is what this money goes for. People are thrilled to pay for that.
Yeah,
That was one of the things that Frank brought up at the Business Alliance meeting, was could you do some kind of a quick, easy post flyer that you could put at your register that says, this is what the resort tax is for, or this is,
yeah.
so that we could.
How the resort tax helps our community, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the public relations campaign
Yeah.
that happens to get it voted in.
Yeah.
that should
There's more
definitely-
negativity from inside than there is from outside.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, there are,
Yeah.
exactly. But, the thing is, we just need to educate the inside
Yeah.
too, to what they're getting.
When-
Okay,
yeah, before the
any other
resort tax,
business?
people, out-of-staters wanna pay tax.
We need to schedule our next meeting,
I think
Seth.
throw it into a beer fund.
We already did.
Would be November,
Thanks, Terry.
Yeah, thanks.
November, is it the 4th?
If it's a Monday,
Yes.
November, yes,
Oh,
4th
November
is a
6th.
Monday, it's the 5th, I know.
I had us down as the 6th, did we already agree?
Yeah, we've got, down here that we're gonna meet on November
Yeah, the
6th
first Wednesday is our usual
Wednesday.
meeting.
Oh,
Yeah.
Wednesday, no,
at 5:30.
Wednesday, not Monday. Yeah.
That's okay, James, we love you.
I got that last agenda like at the nick of time to meet that 10-day notice. I hit submit on a grant at like 4:30, and I'm like, what do I need to do before 5 o'clock? And then I'm like, oh,
We
resort
can
taxes.
change that.
I know.
We can change that resolution.
Yeah,
Wouldn't put so much pressure.
And that's at 5:30, right?
That's at 5:30, yeah.
okay, should we schedule the following meeting?
Yeah, let's do that. I actually, you know what, I think I would like our next meeting to be after that, unless you guys are,
January,
yes, no, I'm wondering if we wanna start thinking about when we have our public meeting.
I agree.
Maybe it's not the next meeting after that,
Yeah.
but we probably, I would love to see us at least, maybe we'll put that on the agenda for the next meeting, is to schedule the public meeting.
I think, yeah, I mean, if we could do it maybe mid-December, that might be a good time to do it, because if we don't do it before, a week before Christmas, we're gonna have to probably wait till a week after the New Year.
Yeah.
I'd say you're better off to have it in January than.
Yeah, I think you're probably, than any time in
because
December.
Everybody's focused on other activities
Yeah.
from November
But
to
January.
December.
We need to get scheduled.
Yes, but we
Put
can-
ourselves
yeah.
on track.
Minimal attendance.
Where we're gonna have it,
Right.
who's going to be,
Yeah,
But maybe for now, we're just gonna think early to mid-January.
yep, I think that sounds great. And that might be, when we put out the, maybe there's one more, would you be willing to attend a public meeting in mid-January?
When's your survey gonna go out?
Well, that's the question. I would love to see our survey go out right after our next meeting. We can confirm, we get the survey finalized at the next meeting. I'd love to see the survey go out right at the next meeting. So that gives us, 30 days to have the survey out and active too.
Yeah.
And then some time to process the information, then we have the public meeting. So that makes sense.
We were shocked with the resort tax, or the recycling survey,
The number of, yeah.
the number of responses we got. And we did a paper one too that people could fill out and then input all that information so that we get everybody. Some people aren't online, so.
are we gonna meet in December, our first Wednesday meeting?
Yes.
December 4th?
Yep.
And that one will be at 5:30 as well?
Yes.
Do we wanna do another meeting 4 weeks from today? That'd be November 18th at 11:30 if we wanna try and keep up with a day schedule.
Yeah.
I won't be able to make that one, I'll be in Helena again.
So what was that date? November.
18th is the third Monday, which is, today's the third Monday of October.
So you said you're in Helen on the 18th?
Yeah.
I'm in Helen on the 18th too.
okay.
Don't forget the 18th.
You'd still have a quorum.
Yeah,
How about, when are, will you be back on Tuesday? Or is
No.
it like a?
I don't know, my calendar right now is showing that I'm gone Monday, Tuesday for a state emergency response commission meeting.
well, we can always meet on November 6th and then kind of determine, do we
Yeah.
think we need another meeting before our December meeting?
Yeah, we've got time.
Okay.
Yeah, I like how much participation we got today. The last meeting, there was, hardly anyone here, so.
Despite my blunders on the agenda.
The other thing that we could do after the next meeting is if we split up, if we're planning a public meeting, and split up into committees.
Yeah.
Those committees can go get their whatever their work is
Done,
done,
and then
come back
we-
and meet.
Yep, sure.
So it's not necessarily just.
What was Tara's last name?
Mastel, M-A-S-T-E-L.
And Heather?
Wait,
QUIN.
Okay.
all right, any other business? I'll accept the motion to
So
adjourn.
moved.
One clarification, I think Diane kind of did that, and I've been putting on similar information. One of my tasks for this meeting was to kind of show our wins.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I was a little unclear when was trying to dig into that, but my interpretation was these were our legal expenditures that have benefited the city. Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of that list that I
Yeah,
put together,
yeah.
the positive part
Yeah.
of the whole thing, which there's lots.
Yep.
There's lots of stuff, that, like you said, the
Well, maybe-
tax would be paid for this stuff.
Yes.
Well, maybe, and some of that, for our presentation, go get some pictures.
Yes.
Probably not of the pool, but of the, the gazebo or the park, some of the parks that were created that weren't there before, and the trail system,
Sidewalks.
sidewalks.
And
Yeah.
people do need to know how much into the water and sewer projects
Right.
that
I mean,
would
that's-
directly come out of our pockets.
Yeah.
Because you have to do those things,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, $6 million is enough.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Did we vote on the motion to adjourn? Do we have to? do
All
that?
opposed?
Who wants to get kicked?